G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this video is my first ever sketchbook tour, and I've never done one of these before, so go easy on me, but I have had a lot of requests to have a sketchbook tour, and with the recent release of my animated short, The Tale Teller, I thought it might be interesting to maybe take you through the sketchbook that I designed the characters for The Tale Teller in, and sort of talk a little bit about the design process that I went through, because it's the same design process that I go through and explain in all of my character design videos, but it was my own personal one that I took a lot of time with for a production that I was going to invest a lot of time in. So let's jump straight into it. This is, as you may be familiar with, the final character design of the Tale Teller, and I'll go through this and the other characters in a moment, but I'm going to first take you back to the very beginning, before the Tale Teller's tale was told. I don't know why I'm spooky. Okay, alright, so these are my very first sketches. And this is when I started to conceptualize the idea of the Tale Teller character. And there were a few things that I had in mind that I wanted to sort of convey through the character. One was obviously that he be old and have a bit of a kooky look about him. But the other was, as I sort of started to try and develop the aesthetic, I realized I really wanted to work with shape and silhouette in an interesting way. So in these earlier character designs here, you can see I started to play with it a little bit, but there was still just a bit too much of a rough and naturalistic aesthetic that wasn't carrying across the style I really wanted to capture. So in these character designs here, it really just wasn't hitting the tick boxes. Whereas when I started to play with sharper edges, particularly in some of these designs, I started to feel quite comfortable with it. But one of my firm beliefs with the character design process is that it's really important to try things that you may not be thinking of. So I did try things that weren't necessarily in that sharp, solid style just to see if they did or didn't work. Eventually, when I started drawing character designs like this, those really sharp corners started to really have an effect on me. I really started to really enjoy those, and I tried to play with elongating things and trying with and without glasses, and trying really strong silhouette changes, like having a very strong lower jaw, trying very strong noses. But as you can see, this shape here, very much like this shape here, is something that really started to carry across what I was feeling comfortable with and really enjoying. This sort of egg-shaped head that was being pulled back, and a nose and beard that were crooked and pushing forward. So when I started to be comfortable with the head design, as you can see here, things started to become a bit more solid. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see that a bit better. I started to play around with body variants, and the body, interestingly enough, didn't have too many different experimental types, because once I started to have a solid facial design, head design, the body sort of started designing itself. I knew I really wanted very long, thin limbs that were always visible, so I didn't want to cover him up with too many cloaky things that sort of covered his limbs. I wanted his arms and legs to really be seen, because I think having such thin, long limbs made him look sort of fun, quirky and crooked, but also in a way slightly vulnerable and slightly weak. But the main thing I was playing with were the aspects of his outfits. So this was a character that was going to carry his tales on him, carry paper and books and stories, and also be in a bit of a medieval fantasy aesthetic style. A bit more of a fairy tale style though, not anything gritty, something a little more fun. I also was playing with the idea of pigeons. And the reason I was doing this is because pigeons represent home. They're like, they symbolize the idea of home, and they also symbolize the idea of being message carriers. And both of those things related to the Tale Teller character in a way that I wanted to incorporate. Both in the fact that he is a storyteller, so he carries messages, but also that he's homeless. And so wherever he goes and wherever he takes his stories is his home. So I incorporated the pigeon aspect actually through his color scheme, which I'll get to later, using some of those turquoise colors, some of the purples and a bit of the gray. So then moving on here, when I started to feel pretty solid in the Taleteller's character design, at this point I was just playing with how it all came together. So for example, how would he carry scrolls? Would they be in a backpack like this? Or would they be in a bit of a sheath? Or what would you call it? What, like those arrow things, a coif? I don't know what the word is. What's a coif? Anyway, eventually I settled on the over-the-shoulder satchel that held the scrolls like that. And when I start to feel solid in an idea, that's when I start to test it and play with it. Especially when you're going to create something for animation, it's important to make sure that you can push it in different directions. So I was at this point very confident in the shawl that turned into a long crooked cape that sort of mirrored the beard shape that we have, sort of crooked and pushing forward like that. So when I started to have these ideas come together in a way I was happy with, then I had to play with them and test them in context. I started off by doing this with the head. So when I felt confident in the direction of the head, it then stood to reason that I needed to see how it worked in context. And so this is where I really start to play and push the features of the character. And it's also a fun sort of way to explore the character emotionally and see what directions they will and can go in. You know, what do they look like when they're angry, happy, and sad, and how extreme will they naturally go in those directions as a character. And this is where I sort of played with those, and also trying to do that on as many different angles as possible to see how well those shapes and those silhouettes carry across. And also starting to do a bit of a similar thing with the body, just seeing if we can push him in upwards and downwards and crouched directions and so on and so forth. So that is the Taleteller character design. I'll get to colour for all the characters at the end of this video. But after I designed the Taleteller, I moved on to the other characters. So the next one that I started to work on was the Jester. And I initially was going to call him the Ugly Jester, but I thought that was a bit mean. So I went with the Angry Jester instead. But I really wanted him to look like a character that would be, you would see him immediately and think, what a funny character. You know what I mean? Like, that he would stylistically be enjoyable to see and still be aesthetically appealing, but have a bit of an edge to him and have a slight, I'm not quite sure what the word is, not grit, something a little different, something that would be not unappealing, but I don't know, a little off. And so in not having eyebrows and in having tufts of hair that come out in different directions and also having a gap in his teeth, we create that sort of different look, especially with the dark ringed eyes around the character. But they also help emphasize the actual character in its entirety and help emphasize his expressions, I feel. So in particular, when I drew this face, I really felt like I was onto something. Earlier, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going for. I did like this face shape that sort of branched out to the bottom and turned into a sharp jaw. So I started to work with that more and more. But then when I hit this balding head style with the dark eyes and the gap tooth, I really felt like I was onto something I was very happy with. Moving along, I started to play around with the outfit, and I settled pretty quickly on what the Jester's outfit would be, and then started to test that. And when I found a face that I was happy with, and I believe this was the full body I drew when I thought, I'm really happy with that, I really like that. That's when I did the same thing with this character and really played with the positions, poses, and the intensity that he could hold expressions in. Really pushing his happies to the happiest they could go, and pushing his angries and sads and shocks and conniving expressions to their extremes as well. This was actually one of my favourite character drawings that I made of pretty much any of the Taleteller characters. I really felt like this captured the Jester, the angry Jester, in the way that I wanted him to come across in the animation. And also, I felt at the time, showed a lot of sort of body and facial flexibility. It made me feel like he was ready to animate, even though the shapes I was working with, in particular in the face, were a little bit tricky to work with. So moving on, we hit the Weeping Widow. And she was quite difficult, not the least of which is because sometimes I struggle to draw women in a way that is different or appealing. Everyone has their things that they sort of struggle with, and I wanted the Weeping Widow to feel like she was sort of middle-aged or a little more mature in her age, but also not look old, or at least not in an unappealing way. I wanted her to have a fairly, what's the word, sort of like youthful or narrow face, while still looking sort of downtrodden and a little bit weary. And I found the way to do this was with very, very thin bags under her eyes. But whenever they were too prominent, it really, especially with lines in the side of her mouth, whenever it stood out more than you would expect, it just sort of aged her far too much. So even here, even something as simple as a little line beside the mouth really packed on the age, especially here. So I think this one, and you can actually see I outlined behind the character because I really like the look that this picture captured. That's when I started to work in that direction, and very quickly from there I found the widow's character design that I was happy with and started to play with her expressions, angles. I wanted to make sure I could draw her head on different angles and push her expression to limits, but I really felt like that this captured what I wanted. And you can see that in all of these shots there's a slight line under the eye which helps sort of accentuate a little bit more age and a little bit more of a downtrodden look, but at the same time we get a bit of an aesthetically pleasing and appealing character face. And then next we have the soldier. And as you can tell, I was starting off working with very strong and blocky shapes. And I did all throughout the character design until I found one I settled on. There's an attempt here with a design without a jaw, which obviously doesn't work. So I was, in the most part, working in the opposite direction, working with very strong and extreme jaws. And many of these are sort of blocky in the sense that they look actually like blocks with sort of square edges. But when I went in a more sharp direction and made the whole head sort of block, it ticked a box. It felt really nice. I think I drew this silhouette first, and I really like the way that the silhouette of this character design felt really self-contained, and then I needed to try it on a different angle, and that's when I came up with this design, and I was very happy with that. So when I was happy with the facial design, that's when I started to play with the body more. And again, I wanted to work with similar shapes and work with a very broad shoulder base so that when we tapered down into the legs, we have a very masculine silhouette. And I was actually, honestly, pretty happy with the body design. And this was one of the first body designs and outfit designs that I drew, and that ended up essentially being his final design. So sometimes it takes quite a lot of experimentation to get to the result that you want, and sometimes you just sort of get there pretty quick. And the soldier and the widow happened pretty quickly. Whenever I find a design I'm happy with, I nearly always test it. And I knew that the soldier would have different appearances in the animation. So he would appear first as a soldier in his uniform or his armor, but later he would return and not have that on. So I needed to see what he would look like without his helmet. And when I drew this design here with him without his helmet and felt very warm about the character, which is exactly how I wanted people to feel when they saw him later on in the animation, I felt like I really hit the spot, and I was really happy with that. So that's how I came to the soldier idea. And then finally, I started playing with pigeons again. I just wanted to make sure that I could incorporate these pigeon birds fairly seamlessly in a couple of places in the animation, especially because I felt like I could use them as a little bit of a way to carry a bit of the message across, or the symbolism across, attached to the tale teller character. So now I'm going to go through the final character concepts that I created, and this was the coloured piece, the coloured concept piece of the soldier that I put together. And I did each of these pieces when I finished the concept art, and I actually have had sheets of 6 of these drawings of the outlines of the character that I scribbled different colors on and tested different combinations until I settled on this one. I'm really disappointed because I actually can't find those color sheets anymore. So I actually don't know where they are. They're just lost to oblivion, which is a real shame because I would have loved to have shown you the color experimentation process before I settled on these. But in the end, I settled on this for the soldier, which has a slightly desaturated look, which is what I wanted because he is sort of part of one of the darkest parts of the animation, and is going through probably the most tumultuous emotional time out of all of the characters. So I wanted to sort of ground him in his colors. Then before him in the animation is the weeping widow, and she has more autumn sort of colors, which is appropriate because she shows up in the animation in autumn. So I wanted to have some warmth throughout the character. And I also wanted to show her age a little bit more than through lines on her face, because lines on her face tends to add unnecessary detail and also lose appeal, I feel, in the character. So while I had some lines directly under her eyes, I added a little bit of age by greying out the sides of her hair. And I think also grey hair in patches can be mentally associated with stress. I think we sort of attach that or associate that to that emotional attribute, and I wanted to sort of incorporate that as well. But otherwise, the body design is fairly simple and straightforward, just using key design little features like the circles for the shoulders, and then the pointy breasts, and then coming in and at the waist, and a fairly straightforward and simple shape for the lower body. So that is the Widow. Then we have the Angry Jester, who I've actually got to say it's got to be one of my favorite character designs out of all of these. I just really enjoy his look, and actually his body and the way he's drawn. I mean, obviously he's a little person, but his proportions and the way I wanted to approach and draw his body is actually modeled after a toddler, which is funny because when I designed him, my son was quite young, and he sort of reminded me of the Angry Jester, so I used to call him the Angry Jester as a bit of a joke. But yeah, I enjoy that cute sort of look with the stumpy arms and the bean-shaped body. The colours are obviously quite hot in general, so we have reds, oranges, yellows, bit of pink skin and some freckles. And this obviously is to emphasize the angry aspect of this character, because when he shows up in the animation, he's enraged. But also I wanted to lift the color scheme of the animation in general and add some punch, and I could do that and could afford to do that through the Angry Jester. And then last but not least, we have the color schemes of the Tale Teller. So as you can see, I actually incorporated pigeons in his final character design just to sort of show those carrying across colors. Now obviously pigeons aren't this bright in color, so I sort of initially was going to have the pigeons the same color as the Tale Teller. I ended up changing them and desaturating them somewhat, but the basic idea of this color scheme does carry across, and I felt like it worked quite well. I tried different things for the Tale Teller. I tried more browns, more greens, but in the end, I think having the purple and the turquoise also helped set up a bit of a whimsical aesthetic and feel to the animation, and I was really happy with the color scheme when I found it. I really like his gloves too. I don't know what it is about fingerless gloves, but whenever I design a character with fingerless gloves, they seem kind of cool. So yeah. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, that is my little guide through my sketchbook. I've never done a sketchbook tour before, but I hope I did it how people are supposed to do it, and that you guys enjoyed it, and a little bit of the insight into my thought process when I designed these characters. So yeah, I don't know, leave your comments below if you found that interesting or not, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and all that stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for your support, and I really appreciate anyone who's watched or shared or enjoyed the Tale Teller animation. Like I've said before, it's been like a year of my life that I've put into making that animation. Thanks so much for watching and for your support. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you later.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for new content every week. If you want to support my work and get some goodies for yourself, head over to my store for archives, ebooks, digital brushes, video courses, and more. If you enjoyed this video, here's a link to another video you might like from this channel. And if you want even more, make sure to check out all my behind the scenes action on my vlog channel, Daily Jazza. Draw with Jazza is proudly sponsored by Adobe. Join the Creative Cloud today and get loads of incredible creative tools like Photoshop, Animate, Premiere Pro, and other apps for your computer or mobile device. That's it for now. Thanks for joining the arty party, and until next time, I'll see you later.